Dasko is next, and you'll follow her. Senator Dasko.
Thank you, Speaker. Honourable Senators, I rise today to speak to the message from the House of Commons on Bill C-48, known by its shorthand as the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act. As a member of the Senate Standing Committee on Transportation and Communications, I had a special opportunity to participate in the deliberations on this bill. Our long process included holding 22 meetings, hearing 139 witnesses, and travel to 4 communities. I am grateful that I had such wonderful colleagues on the committee, and we formed an unshakable bond. And in some strange way, I will miss C-48 after it is gone.
PTSD.
Yes. The message we have from the House of Commons takes us pretty much back to the original bill. And from the very beginning of studying this bill, I sort of thought it was a generally good idea. And as I continued through deliberations and study, I found it to be quite a good bill. And now, hearing so much criticism, I feel compelled to stand today to talk to the bill. I'm going to be brief in my remarks, but I do want to say that I do believe that we should accept the message. So let me just tell you my general thoughts about C-48. To me, C-48 has all of the elements of what should be a successful and widely accepted bill. First, it's based on established policy. The tanker moratorium is well-grounded. It's a well-grounded policy which came into existence several decades ago. As we all know, in 1977, a system was established for American tankers carrying American crude from Alaska to the U.S. mainland, whereby they would avoid the west coast of BC. This practice was formalized in the 1985 understanding between the Canadian and U.S. Coast Guards to create a voluntary tanker exclusion zone. I understand that all federal and all BC governments have supported the voluntary arrangements over these many decades. C-48 is the further formalization of this agreement applied now to Canadian tankers. How many policies in this country have the opportunity to be tested for almost 40 years before they are put into legislation? 40 years of testing a policy before we turn it into legislation. How often does that happen? Almost never. To me, it's a moderate, tested policy. No tankers have traveled in this area before, and none will travel in the future. So that's the first point I'd like to make. The second feature that makes this a good bill is the reason for the tanker ban, and that is to protect the relatively untouched northern BC coast and the renowned Great Bear Forest and other sensitive areas in the region from the disaster of a future oil spill. Now, we have heard about the uniqueness of this lush habitat in great detail from Senator Jaffer via Senator Wu last week, and I have no need to repeat here her wonderful description. This coast, unlike the East Coast, has never had tanker traffic. And the focus on the environment makes this bill especially timely today, given Canadians' overall increased sensibility to issues like climate change, to all environmental issues and environmental protection. Canadians are more willing now than ever to accept tougher environmental policies. So that's the second reason I think this is a good bill. The third reason that this is a good bill is that it has the support of a great many people and a great many communities. Our trip to Prince Rupert and Terrace was so valuable, so important in showing the committee the extent to which the citizens in the region want C-48. First and foremost, 9 of 11 coastal First Nations, the majority of First Nations in the area, look to C-48 to protect their communities and their current and future livelihoods, developing the fisheries from the catastrophe of an oil spill. Senator McCallum described these views and aspirations of coastal regions exceptionally well last week here in the chamber, and I have no need to repeat here what she said so strongly to us last week. But there are many, many more people who support this bill. Municipal leaders, environmentalists, local citizens, the mayors of Prince Rupert and the mayor of Kitimat, the federal member of parliament from the area, who on cue has walked into our chamber, the provincial MLA from the coastal region, and especially importantly, the provincial government in British Columbia support C-48. This substantial and diverse support is another factor we must take into account in our deliberations. Many, many, many people are imploring us to pass this bill. So that is my third reason. My fourth reason today that should be of great importance to us is the fact that the initiative was promised by the Trudeau Liberals in 2015. Perhaps the promise was made in BC, but it is a promise nevertheless. It has been said, and it is true, that governments sometimes don't go ahead with their promises. For example, electoral reform was a promise not pursued. But when a government decides to go ahead with a promise that has been made, we must weigh this very strongly in our deliberations. They certainly have a mandate, especially from the people of British Columbia, to go ahead with this policy. So those are 4 reasons I think are exceptionally important. But then we might ask, if C-48 seems so obviously good to me, then why has this bill had so much difficulty? Colleagues, there is only one reason, and that has to do with the very sad state of the Alberta-based oil industry, the plunging price of the resource in recent years, the loss of jobs, the loss of futures, and lost hope. The despair has affected the public mood, public dialogue, and even national unity. Now, my former colleagues at Environics teamed up last year with the Canada West Foundation, the Mowat Centre, and the IRPP to undertake a huge public opinion survey of the Canadian public, revisiting various national unity issues. They conducted a large survey of Canadians in 13 provinces as well as Indigenous communities in December last year and January of this year. One very important set of findings relates to the province of Alberta and how that province is experiencing what we might call extreme alienation from Canada. 71% of Albertans say the province does not get the respect it deserves in Canada, up from 49% who felt this way in 2010. 67% of Albertans say they don't have their fair share of influence on national decisions, and that compared to 46% of all Canadians. And 56% of Albertans now say that they get so few benefits from Canada that they might as well go on their own, and this figure up from only 28% in 2010. The subsequent Alberta election campaign, with its impassioned rhetoric, made such views even more salient. And Premier Kenney articulated these exact themes when he appeared before our committee on April 30th, saying that Alberta is the largest fiscal contributor to the rest of the country, and that there is a crisis of confidence in Alberta about federalism, and there is also a national unity crisis. He also spoke of secession sentiments. We have to conclude that these attitudes and perceptions are real, and so is the reality of the economic situation and lost revenues, jobs and opportunities that have disappeared in the resource sector. I think, and I know that many Canadians sympathize with this situation. And I know that the situation today is different, at least with respect to other Canadians, from the bad old days of the National Energy Program. I truly feel that Canadians in the rest of Canada understand and sympathize tremendously with what Alberta is going through. I firmly believe that. I know that, Senator Simons, and I've said this to you before. I know that to be a fact. Now, many Albertans have taken out their disappointment on the tanker bill. Albertans have a right to be angry, but this bill doesn't deserve so much anger. It doesn't. We get emails from folks across, from Alberta who talk about all the jobs that they will have when C-48 is defeated. They are expecting a bounty of jobs as soon as the bill is defeated. And I have to say, however, with deep respect, that some Albertans have been given false hope by the possible demise of this bill, unfortunately, and I say that with deep respect. The end of C-48 does not create jobs in Alberta. Unfortunately, there is no pipeline coming in the foreseeable future. There is no Northern TMX. There is no Northern Keystone on the horizon. And I say this with regret. And in addition to that, our travels in the region have confirmed to me the huge opposition that exists in the region to pipeline construction. We learned about Northern Gateway and why it was unsuccessful. There was a plebiscite in Kitimat where the citizens turned down the Northern Gateway. They didn't like it, and this is a resource town. There has been opposition from just about every corner in that community. According to Annie Hill of the Northwest Watch Society, and I quote, "Every city council in the region passed resolutions rejecting Northern Gateway." So we have to understand that is a factor as well. There is huge opposition in the region to building pipelines. So I just wanted to put that on the record, but I want to get back to the theme in conclusion. In spite of this, we know that there is still anger and disappointment in the province of Alberta. In response to that, last week, the in-depth regional review amendment crafted by Senators Sinclair and Pratt last week and accepted by the Senate, in my view, was a genuine good faith effort to keep hope alive and to signal to Alberta that we care about them. The government has now turned this down, and we are left with essentially the original C-48 almost untouched. We have, as part of the bill, an amendment that proposes a moderate 5-year review of the legislation, which I feel will, in fact, be of some help in understanding and in reaching out to Alberta. I believe, colleagues, that it is finally time for us to accept the message and to accept that we have done all we can. I urge us to accept the message from the House of Commons. Thank you.